earth here is not my permanent dwelling place, but I'm on tour. I thought as Brother Marlow gave us that beautiful message. 600 years or so later, there was a man and a woman, and they were Israelites. But there was a famine in Israel, and his name was Elimelech, and her name was Naomi. And they said they were afraid they were going to starve. So you know what they did? They went to a cursed nation, the Moabite nation that was a product of Lot and his children. And they went to this nation for food, for natural food. And they found sorrow. They took their 2 sons, and their sons married Moabites, women of the country where they were. And their sons died, and the husband died. And Naomi was going back to her homeland. And we all know the story, the most beautiful story of Ruth and Orpah, and how that Naomi told them, you know, I'm too old to have another son. Go back to your homeland. And Ruth said the most beautiful words, entreat me not to leave thee or from following after thee. For whither thou goest, I will go. Thy God shall be my God, and thy people my people. And where thou die, there will I die also. So Naomi was going back to her homeland. And they said, Naomi, we're so glad to see you. And she said, don't call me Naomi. Call me Myra. Myra means bitter. And I thought, in the world that we live in today, when the Lord calls us out of the throng of people, out of the mass of people, by His mercy and His grace, He calls us into a kingdom that He wants us to abide there. And when we get our eyes off of that, I was talking to someone this week, and I said, you know, in the 16th chapter of Matthew, Jesus said, who do men say that I am? And they said, well, some say you're Elias, and some say you're this, and some say you're that. He said, who do you say that I am? And Peter right then received a revelation, and he said, thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. Later on now, he backslid, and he lost it. But you see, he didn't have the gift of the Holy Ghost like you do, like I do. But back to Naomi, when she went back to her homeland, she was bitter. And that's what happens to people when the Lord calls them in and says He chooses them, and He wants them to be a part of His bride, of His called out people. And they get their eyes on something else, or we do, and we turn from what the vision that the Lord had given us back to a country that is a cursed nation to satisfy something, a need that we feel like we want in our earthly being. And just as Peter had this revelation of who Jesus was, you see, that was the starting point in his life. It was not the final step, but it was a starting point. And from that point on, he had to walk in the light as it was revealed to him. He didn't have what he needed by that first initial experience, and neither do we. But it's a progressive state that we have to walk on and on. Here a little and there a little, as Isaiah said. But you know, if we keep on that straight and narrow, we know what our reward will be. And one of my favorite chapters in the Bible is the 26th chapter of Acts, where Festus brought Paul before Agrippa. And I know you've heard me say this before. And Festus started to tell Agrippa, and Agrippa said, oh, let him speak for himself. And Paul, don't you know, he threw his shoulders back and he said, most gladly, most gladly. And he told Agrippa from the time that he had his initial experience with the Lord, and how that he fell off of this animal and he was blinded. But you see, Paul had a definite experience with the Lord. And from that time on, he progressed and progressed. And he told Agrippa about things like this. And at the end, I think it's so beautiful, he said, I have kept the heavenly vision. And how important that is in our life. That we don't want to go to Moab or any other place, but we know that we're on tour, and we know what our destination is.